What is going on, everyone? Happy Wednesday. So excited to be here with you today inside the Business Growth Secrets for Dietitians and Nutrition Coaches. I have a very special guest with you tonight, Andres. Thank you so much for being here, my friend. So excited to have you. And I know we sent out an email and a text this morning and letting them know what was happening tonight, because typically we do one live training a week and that's it. And I was like, hey, who's interested in joining us tonight? We had a bunch of responses. So I know everyone here tonight is excited to hear about your story, Andres, the amazing things that you've done, the ups and downs, because there's always the downs as well, and just sharing your wisdom through the experiences that you've had. So thanks so much for being here, man.
Absolutely, dude. Thank you so much for having me, and excited to just share anything that I can. I'm an open book, so ask away anything that you'd like to know or anything like people like to hear about.
Awesome. So I will say, for everyone that's jumping on, let's see who's on here right now. We got Alexa in the house. We got Kat. Kat says, happy Dietitian Day. That's right. That's right. Happy National RD Day.
Today it's Registered
Day.
Dietitian Day. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excited about that.
Awesome. Good stuff. Hello, everyone. As you're jumping on, just go ahead and say hello. If you're on live, say live. If you're on the replay, say replay. Let other people know that you're here, because that'll let other people in this community also know that there's some fire being shared in here. So say hello in the chat if you are watching. We got Dina says hello. Beautiful. Alexa live. Excellent. So Andres, I think we can definitely start with a little bit of your background, your story. Where you got started and what that transpired to, and how you got to where you are today. And then, throughout, if anyone has questions for Andres specifically, just drop those questions down below and we'll get to them at the end.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. So, well, a little bit about me. I'm a Venezuelan immigrant. I migrated here from Venezuela in 2009 to come to school here as an international student. Sort of like pursuing the American dream in a way, not as entrepreneurship, but just simply I wanted to kind of pursue bigger opportunities here in the US. So born and bred in Venezuela, in a small town on the East Coast, moved to the big city when I went to college. And I was an exchange student here in the United States at some point, and eventually I went back and I decided that I really wanted to pursue my career as a sports nutrition coach or sports dietitian here in the United States. So 3 semesters into my dietetics program in Venezuela, I decided to secretly start applying for a lot of programs. And I eventually got into a bunch. And the long story short for that is that I eventually ended up moving very rapidly, leaving everything behind and just pursuing that dream that I was wanting to do. At some point, I wanted to be a doctor. Dietetics actually happened as an accident, and eventually led into a path of a lot of incredible things that happen in the next 10 to 15 years of my life. When I was here in the United States, I got my degree as a bachelor's degree in nutrition. I became a registered dietitian, shortly after that, after maybe 4 years or so in school. And I've been jumping around all over the US, right? I went from Indiana to Houston to get my dietetic internship done. From there, literally within a week's notice, I had to kind of pass my RD exam and move to Florida to work in a sports facility called IMG Academy, where I kind of started my roots as a sports dietitian. And from there, dude, I've been in Florida ever since 2013 or 14. I got my master's from UCF in sports nutrition as well. And I got every, certification that I was supposed to be getting, from, certified specialist in sports dietetics to certified strength and conditioning coach, and all the letters that I could put after my name, which actually, as of today, I've actually lost a bunch of them, but not necessarily because not by it. I mean, it wasn't really by accident. I just chose, honestly, I didn't really need to have letters in my name to be able to provide value. So now I serve a larger community, and I established my own business in 2000. Started kind of in 2015, but I failed miserably in it, and we can kind of get into that at some point here today. But officially in 2019, when I went on as a full-time entrepreneur, as an online dietitian, and we founded Viva Nutrition, which now it's called Planos Nutrition, because we had to rebrand, talking about, a little bit of forced difficulties that we had to run into. And now we run as you mentioned, a multi six-figure nutrition coaching business. We have a team of 6 in our program, and we're serving anywhere between 40 to 60 members every single month. And we sell high ticket coaching programs to women in their 30s who are looking to lose weight and build a blueprint for their life in terms of fitness, nutrition, and health. I think that's a pretty good kind of summary of my life.
Yeah, seriously. Wow. That's impressive. And it sounds like you've had a lot of practice explaining exactly what you do and help people with. That's awesome, man. So kind of going back to, I know for a lot of people, and especially with social media, and it's great. There's so many benefits to it, but sometimes we only see people's highlight reel and like the amazing things that they're doing. And it's so easy to get caught up in that and think that, oh, like everything must be perfect, and they can do it, but I can't. And I know you briefly mentioned like what happened, I think earlier on in like 2015. And I think you mentioned like a failed business. And obviously like you've had a lot of success since then. But kind of going back to that point in time, like what did you mean by that? Like what was going on? What was that failed business that you had mentioned? Yeah.
So one of the biggest hurdles that I had to run into as an immigrant was the fact that I didn't really have legality here in the United States at some point. I was a student, and students with working or with student visas have limitations. And at that point, mine was expiring. So I couldn't really work for anybody. But I could, as a student, I don't know how, I could actually establish a company as long as I had somebody else kind of vouching for it and kind of being part of the quote unquote board. So I established a company back then called Viva Nutrition as a way to be able to just try to, make ends meet. And at the same time, it was just an opportunity for me to say, hey, you know what, I can build a business. And in that moment, I had friends in Orlando where I was living at the time who were opening up a gym. It was a CrossFit gym. And they told me like, hey, we have this business we're starting. We have 50 members signed up, and I think it's going to be a good opportunity for you to start. So in my mind, I remember vividly, getting so excited over a dinner in a sushi restaurant in Orlando, in East Side Orlando. And I was like, this is going to be such an exciting thing. I'm going to start making money. I'm going to be able to, and back then, let alone like, I need to kind of tell a little bit more about, like, I was broke, right? I was, asking family for money. I was barely making ends meet. Like I really didn't go out anywhere because I was literally like really struggling financially. So this became as a really great opportunity. So they said, hey, 50 members already signed up and you can kind of have all of them. So in my mind, I thought, like, I saw each one of those people as dollar signs, right? Like they were like, okay, I have 50 people that I'm going to have as clients. Of course, that's not really how business work, right? Like you just can't expect to show up and then say, hello, wave your hand. I'm a registered dietitian. You should listen to me and give me your credit card. So of course, like I was faced with adversity immediately when I realized, like, out of the 50, 1 or 2 people actually kind of wanted to work with me. So of course I was really like, I kind of got hit in the face real hard, real quick because of that. Because I realized that's not really how business operates, right? Like you have to sell your brand, sell yourself. You have to kind of do all these different things like that. People need to know you, like you, trust you before you can actually kind of get them to really give you your credit card. So for a long time, I really couldn't figure that out. And I read the books and I watched the YouTube videos and I did all these different things, but I really couldn't make it click. So at some point, I realized like I can't, like, I mean, I'm not going to starve. I can't really keep asking for my family for money so they can support me. So you know what? I'm going to have to get a job. So that's what I consider sort of like a bit of a failure because I had to really stop my pursuit of a business. I was still running it and I was still kind of seeing clients and whatever may be the case, but I was not able to pay my bills with what I was making as a company or as a business then. So I had to get a job at the university, which is the only place where I could get employed, being on a student visa. So, and that lasted for like a year, and that job led to another opportunity here in Tampa, which is where I live right now, where me and my wife, she was my girlfriend, fiance at a time, and we moved together here because I had another opportunity here for another job, right? And 2 to 3 years passed, and I was still trying to build my own dream. not building somebody else's. But it was very frustrating. And it's funny because I started journaling, I think back in 2016. And I was just a few days ago, I was just reading through all those journals and seeing all like the trajectory that I have been on. And one of the biggest things is just like kind of praying and asking, the universe and God and everything to kind of give me the support to be able to actually accomplishing those things and being able to kind of be on my own. And obviously kind of like looking at myself now and seeing obviously how far I come, then it's obviously something that made me realize that it's possible. So I think in 2018, I made a commitment to myself and I said, I need to like create a plan to get out of this wheel so I can build my own dream and build my own business. So this is what I took like more massive action. I hire a coach. I decided to obviously invest on myself. I kind of switched from my scarcity mindset to more of like an abundant mindset. It was like, this is going to work out. And from there, I created kind of like this plan. And I said, the moment that I match my salary right now, which it was enough for me to be able to live okay and pay my bills and pay all those different things that I needed, in order for me to be able to leave my full-time job and take this leap of faith, I'm going to have to match my salary for at least 6 months, or I'm going to have to double it for at least 3 months. I created that rule in my head. I don't know where that came from, but it's just like, you know what? Like that's going to kind of give me the confidence that I needed to be able to do that. There's other people you hear about in entrepreneurship that they just cold turkey, just leave and then just they make it work and they do that. In my mind, for me, I was more of playing it on the safe side, and that's why I did it. And let alone like, I think 4 months went by and that happened. So it was a lot quicker than I expected. That's when I started to believe in the idea that this is possible. I can do it and I can make it happen. And this is when I, submitted my resignation and said, hey, I'm going to give you guys a 30 days notice. And, 30 days went by and this is literally the home office where for the first time I was actually working, on my own, running my own company. So that's where the whole story, this is not where it began, but this is where it began as a full-time, entrepreneur, online business owner.
Wow. That's incredible. There's just so many, I'm taking notes here because there's so many good takeaways and just components that I think could be super helpful for everyone. So for you specifically, and I know I'm not sure how challenging it could be to like really define what were those shifts that happened in 2018. But I think from a mindset perspective and maybe like a skill set perspective, what were some mindset shifts? I know you said the like shift from scarcity to like abundance was definitely one of them. Was there any other mindset shifts that had to be made for you to, because it was like, you were doing the thing, you were, like you said, on this wheel, and then all of a sudden, like 4 months in, like, boom, like things are happening. So I think it's always a combination, right? Mindset and skill set. What were some mindset shifts that happened, and what were some skills that you think really helped you get to that point?
I think it was like 80% mindset, 20% skills.
Yeah.
And I think that's a song for some reason. But one of the things that I realized was when I hired a coach for myself, this is when I was about to turn 30. And honestly, I was just realizing there were so many people that were friends of mine that were crushing it in business in different areas, right? The people that I work for, this guy, like, who was the owner of the company I was working for, was 26. And that guy was probably a millionaire by the time that I was actually working for him already. So I was like, okay, like this guy, like very smart, but he's a normal average person. And then the coach that I hire, like, which huge props to him, like, because I look up to him highly. He was my first coach, Tony Stefan. He was a nutrition coach back then. Right. And I searched him. I started with him. And one of the things that I did with him was I hired him as a nutrition coach because I was realizing and seeing that he was doing this stuff full time. And I was like, what is this guy doing that like, and honestly, I unintendedly, I literally hired him as a coach with 2 reasons. And he probably knows this. One, I want to see what he's doing, right? So I can maybe even mimic it or have an idea of how to do this. I want to understand his process. And 2, I really want to get, I want to get fucking fit before I turn 30, right? So because I had a trip to Mexico and it was already planned and I was excited about it. So this was in June. And I remember getting off the phone with him and realizing, this is the first time I was ever investing in a coach. And it was like $300 a month, right? He was charging for a very simple email coaching program. And I remember at that time, like when he told me that, I was like, oh man, like, and I had to, like, I started sweating. I was like, because that's obviously kind of the mindset and mentality I've always had, right? Like, like getting $100 outside of my wallet for something was just very, very difficult for me. But I realized, so you know what, I'm going to like do this, right? And in my mind, I thought I'm just going to do this for 2 months. And I did that for 2 months, right? So I still was in that same kind of mentality back then. So I hired him as a coach, and I realized when I started getting like his program, and again, like it wasn't anything special, but I got the goals. I got the results that I wanted. I got super fit. It's the best shape I've ever been in my life. And his program was a Google sheet. He sent this to me. Yes, it was like, adjusted to me. His check-ins were very concise. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the next step. Here's what we're going to do. And I thought, this was so stupid simple, right? And I'm paying $300 a month for this. But I asked myself the question, but am I getting the goals and the results that I want? And I said to myself, yes. So is it worth it? Yes, it is, right? So people typically associate like the money that they spend on just necessarily what do I get, features and benefits, not necessarily looking at the value that they're getting in return. And it's hard to put a price tag to that until you start to understand it as you go through it, right? Because you can sell a program for, like, you can sell nutrition coaching for $50,000 a month, like something outrageous. But if somebody truly believes that you're going to help them solve the biggest issues and the biggest struggles that they've had, they will pay for that, for as outrageous as those things actually may sound like. So the biggest mind shift that I had at that point was, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be like a business savvy person. I just need to be able to get people from point A to point B, that they get excited about it, that they see it, and help them feel valued and understood. And when I realized that, like, as I was getting coached, that just kind of completely shifted. So I started like doing this with other people, right? And this is obviously where the skill set came in. And it's more about how can you sell yourself, right? Because you now understand. So in my mind, I was like, okay, now I understand I can help people because, again, this guy did it for me and he's not smarter than me. I'm not smarter than him. Like, we're equals. So I can do what he's doing. And he has 50 clients, 60, 75 clients under his roster. I have one. Why can't I do that? And I started with that process, right? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start to do this. So this is when I started developing skills. And the skills came from coaching as well, right? Now, I did obviously mimic some of the things that he did with me as a coach, as a nutrition coach, like, how he kind of got on the phone with me, how he kind of like sold me on the idea. And that's kind of how I got my first maybe 3 to 4 clients, up until I got to a point where, like, I was like making maybe $1,000 a month, like $1,500 a month, until I realized, like, you know what? Like, I need to learn more in depth, like the behind the scenes. And at that time, he was starting to sell his coaching, business. He was starting to sell his ideas. Like, I'm going to be able to help you like build a coaching business, and I'm going to help you get to the next level. So that's when I moved from nutrition coaching to now business coaching. And that's where like the skill set, the skill development typically, started at that moment, from learning how to do sales to learning how to do outreach to starting to obviously kind of create like a world-class program and selling higher ticket offers and different things like that. That's where the process started. And, it just kind of evolved, from there. So those are like the biggest things that I feel like I realized. It's understanding that we are not unicorns. Like, we're not nothing special. We can, there's a bunch of people making a lot of money and they are a lot less smart than we are. So if they can do it, you can as well. It's more about kind of getting through the barrier that, and coming up with excuses as to why you can't. And I still battle with that, right? Like, I'm now, my mindset has shifted, right? Now it was going from like, I want to be able to kind of go from like, leave my job so I can have like, I can sustain myself and getting to my first 10K per month, to shifting to now from 10K, I want to make sure I kind of get to multiple 6 figures, multiple 6 figures, to becoming a 7-figure registered dietitian. Right. So like with every level, there's always a new devil that kind of comes in. Again, this is something else like, that my mentor, Tony Stefan, once taught me. So it's more about like what person do you need to become in every stage? And in that moment, that's the shift and the change that I needed to make to make it to that first kind of step in that entrepreneurship, that ladder that I was on.
Yeah, that is so powerful, man. And I think there, I mean, there again, so many nuggets to pull from that. And I think, one piece that I know many people struggle with, and again, like I think we all do at some point. And let me just say hello to everyone who's on right now. So we have Cassie in the house. Hey, Cassie, good to see you. Sean, Ariela, Karan, Sadaf, good to see you. Hello. And as you're jumping on, if you have any questions for Andres, please drop them down. We're gonna have a few moments to ask those to him as well. But I think something you said that's so important is the idea that if it's possible for people that we see out there, it's also possible for us. And like you said, I think there's people out there with less certifications, less degrees or no degrees, right? Doing what us as healthcare professionals do. And I think a lot of people fall into the trap, and I get it, right? It's a little frustrating, but we fall into the trap of just complaining about it. It's like, we gotta stop complaining about it and start doing something about it. If we want to be like the ones in the industry who help people, we have to go out and do it. And I think the difference is that those people, and this is where I hear imposter syndrome comes from, but the people who have the most imposter syndrome, they know how much they don't know because of all the certifications and degrees that they have, that it's like, I don't know anything, because there's so much out there, versus the ones who don't, they don't know what they don't know. So they just do the thing. So it's an interesting, it's pretty ironic how that works. But like you said, everyone who's watching right now, like you guys are, so smart. You have everything you need to help people right now. You just got to go out there and just do it. So, and I know it's easier said than done, but it's true,
Yeah. Yeah. It's easier said than done, but at the end of the day too, it's like the times in which I've accomplished a lot of different things like that. It's being hard to kind of get to that point, but it's a lot simpler than I always kind of like realized that it would be. And that's a big kind of like change that I kind of created at that point. And at some point for me, like I thought that like my goal as a dietitian was to get as many credentials and to be the smartest, person in the room. And the smartest person in the room is not usually the most successful financially, to be honest. It's, a lot of times you want to be the smartest person in the room because you're passionate about a topic and you really don't care too much about like how much money you make. It's just more about like those different areas. That's perfect, right? But if you do have like specific financial goals, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to be like the person with the PhDs and like the multiple degrees. Sure, that helps because it gives you, a higher level of credibility, and that's important. But at the end of the day, as long as people don't care like how many letters you have after your name, some people do, but statistically speaking, nobody gives a shit about like the master's degree, and like nobody actually ever in a sales call asked me, let me hear about your credentials. And the few times this happened, I can count it with the amount of like, fingers in my hand. And I've jumped into a lot of sales calls in the past like 4 years. So it's really not as important. So a lot of times, like we as professionals, we value more those things more so than our ability to be able to take action into helping people. So we spend years in school trying to learn something, and then like we kind of come out of it hoping that people are gonna rain on us in terms of like, now we are the authority, we are the people that can help you. And people are like, who the fuck are you? Like, so that's literally kind of when it comes down to. And that's a very big reality hit that I think a lot of dietitians and health professionals typically jump into after they're done with school, because they get the stamp of approval from the school. Here's your diploma. So now I am the shit. I can do all these different things. When in reality, when you kind of like get and step outside, obviously real life, nobody cares. Right? Nobody cares that you got like a 4.0 GPA on your master's degree or in your bachelor's degree. They care about your ability to help them and sell them on the idea that you can solve their problems.
Yeah, that's so huge. So big for everyone, like take that in, because that's it right there. When we start, and everything, all the challenges, all the problems that I see in our lives and in our business is when we start to get in our head and start focusing on ourselves versus the people that we're helping, right? It's like that selfish behavior versus the selfless, right? And that translates to everything, right? It's like, oh, me, I'm the best, I have all these certifications, versus, hey, what's going on with you? what like, tell me about your pains, tell me about your problems, your frustrations, and like you said, selling them on the vision of what they can have, the life that they can have, the transformation that can happen in their life. Like that's it. And I think, and that's also like personal relationship stuff, focus on the
Yep.
person, give them what they want, and you'll get what you want.
Exactly,
So,
dude.
everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. No, this is awesome. So kind of, I know there's like obviously different levels, like what you were working on and focusing on, just starting off might be a little bit different than what your main focuses are on now. Obviously you have a team of 6 and you've grown significantly. So like if you, I don't know how to simplify this because it's like so many years of work and effort and things that you've done. But if you were to say like the core things that someone has to focus on at like the beginning level, like let's say 0 to 5K, 0 to 10K, to then that next level, and then maybe that third level, like just like what are those things that people should be working on to move up those levels?
Yeah. I do actually have a pretty good kind of framework that I feel like obviously when I
Cool.
reverse engineer everything that I've done and I could go back and do it, I think obviously I know exactly where to go and where to start and what not to do.
Yeah.
The first stage is, I call it the grunt work. And this is obviously where you're gonna have to be like the everything person. You're
Mhm.
learning to do everything. And from 0 to 10K, you're gonna have to do everything yourself. Most of things, unless you don't want to make any money and you don't want to make any profit. And this is where I think a lot of mistakes people make, where they start kind of bringing in like teams and stuff like that once you haven't even gotten to that point, right?
Mhm.
Like, no, to 10K, it's obviously the first kind of step that you have to get. The first step in that process to kind of get to even the first $1,000 that you can kind of make in a month is you have to do a lot of things for free. And the reason I'm going to say this is because it's important to start to kind of establish credibility. So the first, or for free or like barely anything, you have to really get experience. And just because you went to school, this is going to be kind of ruffling a lot of feathers. I'm going to be straight with you, whether you're a dietitian or so, you know shit when you're starting, right? Like dietitians are not good coaches. I'm going to say that from the batch because I wasn't. Right? Like nutrition coaching and building a company around this, it's not just because you have the credentials that you can do this. So you have to get experience and suck it up, swallow your pride, and you're going to have to do part of that process too. So in the very beginning stages, I mean, I work for like $100 a month. I work for $200 a month, like in helping family members and stuff like that, because those first 10 clients are going to be the people you're going to give them all of your energy, right? And again, going back to the same thing, suck it up, do it, provide the value, help them as much as possible, give them the transformation of their life, because those 10 people are going to be like the foundation of your company. They're going to be the foundation of your business. They're going to be the people that said, holy shit, like here's the incredible result that I got from this person. Because you're going to take some of those 5 to 10 people and now you're going to use that as a way to leverage your growth. It's like, hey, look what I did with this person. Yes, I love that. I want to get to that point. Great. It's $300 a month or it's $500 a month. Okay, perfect. So this is obviously where you kind of start to leverage that possibilities. But you can't really, I'm going to be very clear about something. You have to give your clients a life experience, an incredible experience. Your program needs to be something that is incredible, and you have to believe that yourself. And this is something that a lot of times I really struggle with. You have to think that the program and what you offer is the best shit that's ever been created in this universe, whether it is or it isn't, because I know it is. Right? Because when you believe that, right, your clients believe that, and they're so happy that they're making an investment to be able to actually be a part of the program. So in this first stages, it's part of that grunt work is getting experience, not being afraid to a lot of times work for nearly for free. And this is the problem that I kind of run into dietitians right now, specifically the millennial dietitians and like this newer kind of generations, where they're like, a free internship, I'm not going to get paid. Like, oh my God, like I can't believe this. I don't care about people's feelings in this conversation here about that, but I think that's bullshit. Like, right. I did so much, like the dirtiest type of work and jobs actually kind of working. I never complain about it. Yes, it sucked, but it was an experience. And now I see so many people, they're like, I have my RD, so I should deserve to actually get paid this. No, like it's, especially if you're building a business, you need to kind of start from the very like bottom. And you hear about some of these like multi-millionaire guys. You like, you know, for example, Alex Hormozy, like he talks about this shit all the time, right? It's like you need to be able to do some of this grunt work at the beginning to be able to help understand like not only getting experience, but also getting started. The second thing is you need to sell yourself, right? Like you're not going to expect to get people to see you if you don't sell yourself. And most dietitians typically run into the problem where they say, oh, I just like want to come off of salesy, right? Well, if you don't sell, you're not solving the problem with anybody. And there's like, you know, Joe Schmo right next here, the next door, or like the other account that they kind of like saw that have absolutely no credentials and they're selling. So people are paying them and not paying you because you didn't really kind of come off as salesy. There's a line that you can draw, but the key and most important things is you need to tell people that what you do and what you offer, right? And that's one of the things that I realized about me. It's like I was putting a bunch of content and information, but I was not really saying like, hey, I have a program and I can help you get from point A to point B. You know, I'm looking for 3 people that can actually be a part of it, right? If anybody on here hasn't even kind of started or still working a full-time job, and you go in there in your Instagram right now and you say, hey, I'm looking for 5 men and women who are looking to improve their health, lose their first like 10 to 15 pounds in the next like 3 months, you know, comment below and let me know. You're going to get a bunch of people that are going to reply to you. And if you're starting, it's like, hey, great. Like, let's jump on a call. Let's chat a little bit more about where you're at and where you want to go and how it can support you. And if you're a person that is starting, like literally, if I would go back to do this again, that's exactly what I would do. I would get on the phone with them. It's like, hey, listen, you know, because I'm just starting off and, you know, I have all these different things and I have these great ideas. I'm going to give this to you for like almost for free, right? I'm going to like only charge you this much just so we can kind of like get you started into this process. How's that sound? And you're going to get your first like 5 clients at $200 to $300 a month. Like you're going to have your first $1,000 a month guaranteed there, right? For the next 4 months. That's how I started, right? Like part of that conversation and part of those different things. And you don't have to create the perfect program. You don't have to create the perfect, you know, and that's a big issue that to this day, I still battle with. That I don't have to kind of create this like, you know, pretty thing. My first nutrition program was a Google Doc. Yeah. And I never complained once about it. I did, but I realized I didn't really have anything to complain about because I was getting the results. So your clients don't want all the bells and whistles, even if you provide them. It's cool if you have them, but that's not really what they're paying you for. And I need to remind that to myself every single time that we do something new. So that's the first stage. That's good. You know, just so you can kind of like understand that process. And that is exactly what I did to kind of get to 10K. And I got to 10K very quickly. You know, within 6 months, I was already kind of like making $10,000 a month, following that same process, right? Because you start helping people. And with that, you can start increasing your rates because the demand is higher, right? You got now the word of mouth. You start to ask for referrals. Like, hey, like, do you know anybody that needs this help? Like, I would love to help them out. Sure. Yeah. I have my cousin Joe here. He's really looking for a nutrition coach to kind of help them. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Like, you know, introduce them to me and I'll give you on, you know what? I'll give you a month for free if you actually kind of like send me more people. Great. So, I mean, that's just marketing at the end of the day, but that's exactly how I started with the process. And I went from 0 clients and within like a year and a half, I was like just by myself, like handling 55 people. Right. So like, that's like the power of leverage. And I went from charging like $250 a month to charging like $650 a month at some point. And now we actually kind of switch over to a full high ticket model. Right. But that was the first thing. And I never hired anybody until I got to $10,000 a month. That's when I started kind of leveraging the power of outreach and communication and stuff like that. And that's when I started thinking, okay, if I need to scale, this is what I'm going to have to start to maybe possibly bring another coach and other dietitians to start to build a team, you know, from that moment on.
Yeah. I think that's what everyone here really needs to hear. And I think, again, it's just so easy to, in the beginning, say like, I forgot who I was talking to recently. And if you're here listening right now, I love you. But they were like, I just hate social media. And I'm like, I hate social media too. Guess what I love more than I hate social media? I love making more money. I love helping more people. I love the freedom and flexibility that comes with it. It's like, you have to choose, right? You can't have both. Like, I don't like being on social media all the time, but hey, if it's going to get me all those things and I'm going to be able to help a lot of people at the same time, like, I'll take that all day, right? I'm pretty good here at home versus like being in a clinical office, you know, working for someone else. Like, I'll
Yeah.
take this. So you
Yeah,
gotta choose, you gotta choose your heart.
in
Yeah.
online business, this is kind of like where,
Yeah.
I mean, our company, like 99% of our company has been built on social media.
Yeah.
So especially in the online space, it's the only most organic, and that's the other part too. Like people start to talk about ads and talking about like have never paid $1 for ads to this
Mhm.
point, right? Like we have not paid $1 in dime, and trust me, there's times in which I thought I should, but then obviously the coaches and the mentors that I'm being grateful to work under, they've always been gotten to a point where it says like you're not ready for that yet. Like it's not point for you to kind of start, because at the end of the day, like sure, and there's some people that kind of start a lot quicker with ads, and everybody has
Mhm.
different stories and different kinds of paths and trajectories in which it took their business from the very beginning. I just think that there's a lot of opportunity for organic growth. Um,
Yeah.
and that's really where I have, exploited most of those opportunities from the very beginning.
Yeah, that's so good. And so getting to the place where, because I know a lot of people might think, okay, like I think for many people, it's just like it's even hard believing that you could even get to the place where you're replacing your income, right, to begin with, and then getting to 10K months and going from there. But getting to the point where you're actually starting to think a little bit bigger and being like, okay, well, I'm helping people, but I want to help more, and I also want to grow more. Now I'm getting to the place where I'm thinking about, okay, how do I do that, right? And that includes systems and people. Like you need people to do that. So at the point that you're at now, can you maybe talk a little bit about what that transition has been like, maybe some challenges, and ultimately I think, because there's always two parts. There's like the challenges, but there's also that massive benefit, right? So I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about what
Yep.
that experience has been like. Yeah.
So I think the biggest, I can think about kind of like roadblocks that I've kind of experienced in the past 3 years. The biggest one is always kind of going from like, getting to that first six-figure year. And that's just more about kind of like clearing $10,000 a month. That's the first milestone in business, right? Which is to a lot of people like a really good place for them to kind of go full time now in this economy, right? Like, maybe a little bit less. Like I remember when I first like kind of cleared $5,000 a month, I was like, I'm out, right? So, but that's obviously the first stage. Going from a 10 to 30 was a very long haul for me, particularly in and what's it called, like in just like this space, right? We're in a consumer space, so obviously it's very difficult to kind of get to that point, like, and this is where you're gonna have to need a team, right? And going from 30 to 100K per month, which we haven't gotten to, obviously this is the process where it's been even the hardest, right? With every single level there's going to be a much higher, like, and much more difficult kind of process, not impossible, that we had to kind of like learn. So we had to relearn a lot of different things. Was when we were kind of like in the point of kind of like averaging in between 15 or so like that $1,000 a month in our company. This is where I started like thinking, okay, like I need to start like paying to get some time back, because if
Mhm.
I need to scale, I need to start to look into ways in which I can do that. So I was coaching 55 clients. So I was spending a lot of time coaching people, right? And I have VIP clients who were getting calls every other week. And it was a long time, right? So you realize like your calendar starts to fill up quickly. This is obviously when you see private practices in places like that, that's usually their limitation. They grow to a certain level and they're comfortable with that because they just like to see people, right? And then that just kind of gets things running, but you cannot scale because there's only one of you. So when I realized that my time was limited, I started to think, okay, like I now maybe it's time to kind of find an assistant coach or a second coach to help me in this process. So this is when we brought in our first coach, Dana, which she is still with us right now. So I brought in Dana, and now we're just selling for another person, right? So and that's the second step that we took, right? Okay, now I'm selling for another person, and now we kind of like split the work, right? So now was obviously I'm kind of like loading like or lowering my client load. I can kind of send some people over her way, and that was the next step that I started to take. This third person that I hired in my team was an appointment setter, or in that point, and that kind of process was she was called like a client outreach coordinator. She was not really had that term as appointment setter. which she basically took care of a lot of our messaging. She took care of like the reaching out to people. And that's what organic, like, and this is called what we call it, that's called direct outreach marketing, or which is basically DMs, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of reaching out directly to people, having a conversation with them, see what problems you can solve, getting them on the phone, and then obviously selling them on the idea and the solution that you have for them. So that is something that takes a lot of time, but I was doing that myself. I was a person that was like in the morning sending like 10 to 20 to 30 messages to different people, new followers, people that like the Gary V, like hashtag strategy, kind of going and commenting on people, building our community, kind of going live, commenting with stuff. Like that's where I kind of like started with that process. And now I kind of offboarded that to somebody else. So they were sending the messaging and they were trying to book me for calls where I can kind of like go in there and obviously sell people on our program. So that's the third person that we bring into our team. And throughout this entire process, this is where my wife came a very instrumental part of our program, because I started to kind of get into the idea, and this, right? Which is, it's a family business, and
Mhm.
she wanted to have the same flexibility. So she left her job so she can do this with me. So she started kind of like managing memberships and billing and numbers and all that kind of stuff like that. So that was like another thing that I kind of offboarded from me to be able to take care of that. Right. So at that point, it was like I had a coach and I had an appointment setter. And then I had like my wife who was helping him, running all those different things, kind of like sides of the business. And honestly, we ran pretty smoothly up until like last year where, it's like, okay, like Dana is a mom of three and she cannot really do this like massively full time. So I was like, we may have to bring another person, right? If I could do it again, I would go back. I would find somebody that can eventually work up to a full-time person so I don't have to bring two. So that's maybe not necessarily a mistake because we value Dana so much because she's an incredible dietitian, but that's maybe something that I, reflecting back, I could have done a little bit different. So literally from like 20 to 30 to now scaling, I realized like right now I need to jump off of coaching so I can actually empower my coaches so I can focus on scaling our company. So we have two coaches now. I brought in a dietitian full time and she lives in Mexico City. She's not in the US. She has all her credentials and is licensed in Mexico, but she's not really a registered dietitian here. That was a big hurdle for me. And the reason we brought her in is because we needed a Hispanic or Spanish speaking dietitian or Spanish speaking nutrition coach. I sign off on all of her stuff because I'm the dietitian in the program. But it's one of those like kind of hurdles that I run into for a long time and spend 6 months trying to find the right person. And honestly, she was perfect for it. So I decided to bring her on. So that's now, and this again, this is a kind of like business strategies where like I can afford to bring in a full-time dietitian from a different country that, has really good credentials, follows the same kind of practices that we do here in the United States for a very percentage, a small percentage of like what I would be able to kind of pay a registered dietitian full time here. So that was a business strategy that really worked out to my favor. So that's
Yeah.
another person that we bring in. And we also have a content manager who was an intern and she did such a wonderful and incredible job that she kind of like came in and she kind of came in more of like as a VA. Honestly, you need
Mhm.
like, I feel like you need to scale like three important people. You need like somebody that can do your messaging, or especially if you're doing organic marketing, which is somebody that can actually do outreach and setting and helping you actually kind of get more calls. You need a coach that can actually be a success person for the delivery of your program, and you need somebody that like a VA or somebody that can kind of help you manage some of the busy work in your company to a certain extent you're not going to be able to do and handle all those different things. So honestly, for people listening in, maybe I don't really need right now 6 people. I just like value so much what they're doing in our company that I want to be able to kind of help them. Because remember, when you're building a team, your profits are going to start to obviously take a hit, right? So you're not going to be like, you go from a company that you're making $10,000 a month and you think all that money is your revenue and it's like your salary, to no, that's now like the company revenue. You now need to figure out exactly what the profit margins are going to be for that company. That's something else that I have learned throughout the process. So I don't really think like and this is something that I really people need to understand, right? Like, oh,
Yeah,
we
it's
have a
good.
multi six figure company. That doesn't mean that I'm bringing in like $300,000 to $400,000 in my pocket every single year, because we have expenses, we have people to pay. So, and you cannot expect to get to that point unless you want to burn yourself down to the ground to get to like $300,000 to $400,000, $500,000 a year, and just expect like you're gonna do it with one or two people in there. We're not, I'm not in the business to business space where we can kind of sell $10,000 to $20,000 ticket offers where you only need like 4 clients every year or every month to be able to kind of clear 6 figures. You can, and I know a lot of people in the program who are doing that, but we're in the consumer space, right? Our programs typically range anywhere between $3,000 to $4,000, for 4 or 6 month programs. So, we have, in order for us to kind of get to 6 figures, we got to sell like at least 18 to 20 clients every single month. And that's not always an easy feat. So that's some of like the learning lessons that I feel like I got into up until this point.
Yeah, man. Woo, baby. Giving away the farm. I love it. I love it. This is so good. Carol's on, Kimberly, Dina, Kiran, awesome. This has been amazing, man. Thank you so much for sharing everything so far. Does anyone have any questions for Andres here so far? Just go ahead and drop your questions down in the chat right now. And I think, man, there's like so much gold. Again, I'm like trying to figure out where to go here because there's so many good things that we can talk about. But I think one key thing, as we're in our business growing as well, I think one key thing for everyone to realize is that there's this idea that you don't have to do a lot of that grunt work that you were talking about earlier. And you said like in the beginning, you did all the DMs, like you were messaging people like crazy, right? It's like so many people don't want to do it. And it's like, that's what it takes. But the cool thing is, if you have a long-term vision, a long-term plan, right, to be in this for the long haul, you don't have to do it forever, right? But you have to go through it to get to it, right? You have to go through some stuff to get your stuff. And in order for you to teach someone and train someone how to do it the right way, how you want to do it, you have to do it first.
That is a very important thing that I learned. And it was a very big thing that kind of hit me hard when I started, because here's something I'm going to teach you guys about scaling a company, which is, you think you're servicing your clients and you're coaching clients, let's say, for example, in weight loss or like nutrition and health. Well, it turns out when you're building a team, you now turn not only a coach for your clients, you also turn into a coach for your team. And it took me a long time to figure that out. Because for me, when I hired my first RD, again, going back to Dana, which again, bless her heart, she's incredible, but I never coached her, right? My expectation was she's a dietitian, she knows what she's supposed to do, right? And to this day, we still have a lot of like friction in some different kinds of areas in our company because I never sat down with her to really kind of like coach her onto how we want our company to be run, how we want to coach our clients, right? So she created her own little thing, the way that she did things, right? And now when we're trying to kind of implement systems and processes, it was my fault because I didn't really kind of coach her on how to do it. So now with Sassy, who was our new coach, like we have a call every single week for an hour. Let's go through things. What do you want to go over? Like, let's do like a mock call. Let's do some role play. You have to coach your team. And the reason why you need to do the grunt work is because how can you coach somebody about something that you have no clue how to do, right? So I edited videos. I like wrote captions, like, did design. I like did appointment setting. I'm doing sales now. Like all those different things I did myself. So how can you bring somebody in, right? And saying like, I want you to do messaging. Okay, cool. How do I do it? I was like, well, I don't know. Like you should know this. Like you've done this before, right? Or like, this is like, a little thing that I found somewhere. Trust me, that's never gonna work, right? And that's a very important thing that I learned just recently, right? Like in the past like year or so, that I need to spend the time for my team, right? So you're buying yourself time to coach less to people, but you're obviously gonna have to replace that with time that you're coaching your team. Because when you find people, and the other part too is you need to take care of them, right? Like we have like meetings with our team every single week. And one of the things that I did this week, I told them like, I want you guys to make a list of everything that you love to do in our company. And I want you to make a list of all the things you hate doing in this company, right? Because I want to avoid friction, right? I want to be able to kind of build a culture in our company, which is a very important part of it, the process, which is I want to build a culture in which you guys feel cared for, you absolutely love what you're doing right now, because I know I'm going to get the best out of you, right? And that's a big thing for our team, right? Like you want to make your team feel as you're scaling that exactly the way your clients feel, because you know they're going to show up as the best version that they can be. And that's the one thing that I'm extremely grateful for, because you ask anybody in our team right now, hey, who you work for Planos, and what do you think? It's the best company I've ever worked for in my life. And that's the culture that I want to create for people that we bring in, regardless of how big or small we actually stay. Like, you know, if we're going to scale, if we have a multi-million-dollar company, I want to kind of keep the same culture, the same type of thing. Like, if you don't like doing that, perfect. Maybe this is not the role for you. Let's find a role that is going to kind of match out for you best. Or if it's not a really good culture fit for a company, maybe we're just not a good fit for each other. And maybe it's a time for you to find a different opportunity.
Yeah. And I know for most people listening right now, they're like, that's like, wow, that's way ahead of where I'm at right now. But this is key, right? So I would recommend taking some notes, going back to this video, because this is everything, especially as you go to those higher levels in business. So just so good. Andres, we have a couple questions. If you don't mind, maybe we can dive into those real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Is that cool?
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Let's see. Alexa. Great questions, by the way, everyone. So Alexa asks, so did you niche down early or realize you love working with certain people?
That's a good question. Like, the whole niching down thing was, that's been so hard for me, to be honest. And it's probably going to be one of the most difficult things I've ever actually had to do. And here's a good what's it called, like, advice I'll give you guys, and, you know, take it or leave it. But at the very beginning stages, you know, yes, niching down can be helpful, but if you don't really know who you want to help, it's hard to figure out exactly, you know, where you want to niche down on. So for example, when I was starting my company, I was like, I'm a sports dietitian, so I want to help athletes. I kind of realized, and I was kind of like, okay, this is my niche. So I started creating a lot of content for that and stuff like this. But I realized I actually didn't really like that much working with athletes. I prefer to work with a different population. So I started working with dudes, right? And I realized it wasn't really my thing, right? I didn't really kind of feel and again, like, nothing against that. I think it's great. But I really truly realized that my passion was working with women, right? So that's when I kind of started refining the process. So people will tell you, business gurus will say, like, you know, you need to niche down from the beginning. And I think there's obviously some value to that. For example, when you're on TikTok, and that's usually your main platform, you have to speak to a specific audience, because that's how TikTok algorithm operates, right? If you're talking to a bunch of different things and using all different kinds of strategies like that, it's really hard for you to be able to kind of speak to a specific type of people. But in general, at the beginning, you may have to work with a few different people that kind of completely fall outside of, like, they're completely different, to determine exactly who you are passionate about helping. And once you kind of get a good idea after your first like 10, 20, 30 clients that you kind of go through, right? Like, we've served closer to like 800 people in the past like 3 to 4 years, right? So after we've had a really good understanding of those, like, maybe 20 to 30 people that you served, you gonna have to have a better idea of who are the clients that you enjoyed working the most, and who are the clients that value the most what you did for them, right? And you're going to start to create an avatar, and you're going to start to kind of create a specific type of person that benefit from what you do. And that's not going to be something that you're going to just magically kind of like developed, right? Particularly if this is your first time, you know, running a business or doing anything like that. So my advice to you is, you know, start working with different types of populations, right? Don't go in your Instagram right now and kind of like put in there, I help women that are, you know, 32 years old and have, you know, PCOS, kind of like achieve their goals, because perhaps like maybe that's not really something that you're going to be massively passionate about working with, right? So I think it's important to kind of like pick a pond that you want to fish in, but it's more of a bigger pond. And then in that pond, you're going to find obviously a specific group of people that you're going to eventually going to be working with the most. And then at that point, you do all your targeting and all your messaging just for those people, to really kind of help you understand exactly who you're trying to serve. But you need to niche down eventually. You just need to make sure that you kind of like go through that process first before you really figure out exactly who is it that you're trying to help.
Yeah, that's good. That's so good. Beautiful answer. Let's see. So Kim, and I think this question was was answered slightly already with what you broke down about coaching your team and making sure that you're giving them the appropriate training. But Kim asks, how did you trust someone with your baby when you first started to grow?
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to do. And I still remember that vividly. I remember getting on sales calls and really hesitating, and this is something to this day it's hard to let go of, which is you jump in a call with somebody and you know you can help them, and you're like, I don't really know if I want to kind of like assign them to this coach, right? And it comes with time. But the biggest things that you got to remind yourself of is like, you need to let go of this idea that you are a unicorn. Again, one of the things that I learned from Alex Sharfin, which is another guy that I work with, who told me, like, you guys are not unicorns, right? Like, people can do exactly what you do, right? So it's more about like, even somebody, and then another mentor told me, like, if somebody can do 80% of what you can do, like that's a big part of the race that you're trying to win in here. So it's also realizing that the more people and the more like lack of trust that you have, the less you're going to be able to kind of grow to the next level. So, and then what's the worst that can happen? Like, the person is not happy with them, which has happened in our program a few times, not very, like, I can count them with one hand, right? And when you're going to come in, you're going to like, resolute, you're going to obviously find a resolution for that and say, hey, you know what, like, no worries, like, let's just kind of fix this problem, like, I'll take you on, and then we'll kind of like solve this problem, immediately. Or you're trying to kind of figure out exactly what is it that it's happening. But that comes also with like proper coaching of your coaches or the people that you're working with.
Yeah, that's gold. Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, Kimberly. So I actually, as we were growing the private practice, the physical therapy clinic, and we were going and scaling it, I hired a physical therapy assistant. And at that time, we were at about 80 visits per week. And I was like, okay, well, I need to kind of scale back my own time so I can do more of the marketing and, more of the business stuff. So the way I would do it, and everyone's a little bit different, but we were physically there. So after my evaluation, if I knew that this person was going to be mainly seen by the PTA, the physical therapy assistant, I'd bring them over, I'd introduce them, right, and say, hey, so and so, this is Ryan. Ryan has a wealth of knowledge. You're going to ask him a lot of questions. He's like brilliant. And Ryan, this is exactly what's happening with Susie over here. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And he's like, awesome, I got it. And then I would leave the room and they would have a great conversation. Done.
Yeah, you're obviously uplifting, obviously your coach, and you're the person obviously that you're kind of leaving out. And we do that all the time. It's like, hey, you know what? You're going to be working with so-and-so. And she's incredible because of this reasons. And I think she's going to help you because of this reasons, right? I'm still going to be overseeing like the whole process. She's directly coached by me. So she's like, a coach that's been under my wing for like 2 years, 1 year, 6, whatever you want to say. And she's going to give you the experience of your life. I'm still going to be available. Like, should you have any questions, and, you're going to have an incredible time in this process. And ever since then, when I go back into all the clients that she's worked with, like, 2 people have been people that maybe have said like, this is not a good fit. And I really realize who are not good fits to work with her. So I know exactly who is not going to be a good person. And you learn that obviously throughout, error, like that's going to happen, right? That's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, like, you can do exactly what you just described, what I just mentioned, and it's still going to happen, but like you said, Andres, like, you can count out of 800 clients, like, in one hand. So I think that's also important to recognize. But awesome, man, this has been so good. Everyone, give a huge thank you to Andres here tonight for really just spending some time with us, sharing his knowledge, his insights, his experience with you. So give him a big thank you in the chat. And I want to thank you, brother. Thank you so much for hanging out tonight.
Absolutely, dude. Thank you so much for bringing me on, and anything you guys need or any kind of support, I'm always available. I love to kind of provide value and help people in any way that I can. And if there's anything that I can do for any of you guys, just shoot me a message and let me know.
Awesome. Any parting words? Anything that I should have asked that I didn't?
No, I think like, you just got to keep going. There's going to be times in which, and I've gone through like dips and highs and lows in this process, where there's going to be a lot of days, a lot of weeks, and even months in which you just don't want to do this anymore. And I still go through that, right? Like, this is why I have a therapist that can kind of help me navigate through some of this stuff. This is why I have a wife that is extremely supportive throughout this process. Right. And even recently, kind of like thinking maybe I just want to do a different type of business. I want to start something different, and realizing that this is exactly what got me here. And I can do further things, but I think we're not at a point yet where I can just say like, okay, this company can run by itself. And that's a big thing that I usually have learned in the process, right? This is my baby. I grew it. I developed it. I can continue to grow it. We can kind of get to a certain point until people no longer need me, and the company can run without me. But to this point, the company cannot fully run without me. So I need to continue to get to that point, because that's the goal.
Yeah, I love that. Well, again, man, thank you so much. For everyone, we will see you next week, every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're here providing you with as much value and gold as we can. So again, thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Andres.
Thank you.